One of the things I say in response to the media is when they talk about, or especially early on, about the way I did my job, I said, I will absolutely leave the court when I do my job as poorly as you do yours. And that was meant as a compliment, really.
Clarence Thomas's corruption is legendary at this point, and he's proven himself to be a loyal advocate for some of the worst and most depraved corporations and special interest groups in America. Under the Trump administration, he's presided over some of the most consequential and damaging rulings, and many of them have unfortunately flown under the radar. He also, perhaps unsurprisingly, features in the Epstein files. What do you know? Now, while the claims of sexual assault leveled against Thomas are as yet unproven, what is beyond doubt is his total lack of ethics when peddling his influence to some of the richest and most depraved men in the world.
Ellie, this story has everything. It has Leonard Leo, it's got Harlan Crow, the guy with the Garden of Evil. Of course, it's got the Kochs who've been missing from this up to now. And it's also got Ginny Thomas. Of course, it's got Ginny Thomas. Let me read a little piece of this. During the event, one of these events, the group announced a new initiative focused on getting conservatives onto the Supreme Court and the federal bench. The network, which had already given millions of dollars to Leonard Leo's Federalist Society, planned to mobilize its activists to buy advertisements to push senators to vote for President Donald Trump's judicial nominees. They appointed a former employee of Ginny Thomas, the justice's wife, to lead the effort. It's got everything, Ellie. And at this point, how do we conclude that the Supreme Court is anything other than a bought and paid for trifle of the super rich, or at least 6 of them, or some of them?
Yeah, look, I've been waiting for the Koch brothers to show up because anytime a public official goes out for auction in this country, the Koch brothers have a front row seat at Sotheby's, all right? So, like, you knew they were going to get involved in this story eventually.
Or in his view, disclosure rules would be unconstitutional, which is another tactic we've seen some of these right-wing groups, right-wing billionaire-backed groups, push the idea that we shouldn't even have disclosure. But in my view, Thomas's vote in that decision makes that decision all the more illegitimate, in addition to the way the court tried to engraft on our First Amendment free speech rights this notion that money is speech and that we can't have common sense protections against, the corrupting influence or the distorting influence. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that, Tiffany, and what you might have to say about that as well, Congressman. So, Tiffany, could you go first?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up the disclosure and the fact that Clarence Thomas was the only justice on the court to actually to vote against disclosure. 8 of the other justices all said that disclosure and transparency were critical tools in being able to make sure that we were rooting out corruption. That when you have money flowing in, the electorate needs to be able to trace back where that money is coming from to make sure we don't have the corrupting influence of money. And look, I think they were naive at best about their takes on the corrupting influence of money in politics in general. But the very fact that we know all of these pieces about Clarence Thomas now, it also puts his vote about disclosure and allowing dark money into our politics into that much more harsh of a light.
My understanding, and again, non-lawyer, is that it could render toothless laws passed, right? It could make it harder to enforce things to, for example, protect the environment or protect water or protect the air.
This is the death penalty for the administrative state. I mean,
wow.
This is really as consequential, I think they say that in the article, as Brown v. Board or Roe v. Wade in terms of this decades-long process of dismantling government's ability, whether it's the EPA, workers' rights, whatever it is. If you're not going to Chevron demands that if a statute is ambiguous, you defer to the agency's interpretation of the statute. That has to be the case. To dismantle that is to say every agency decision could be wrong. We'll let you know. So there's no way that you can run any regulatory agency if you always have the court about to say, no, your interpretation of the statute is wrong. And so I think you have to see this as of a piece with this major questions doctrine, right? This is another version of the same thing, which is like, oh, no, if this is a big deal, then it has to be written really clearly. It's all of a piece with this effort to essentially end government as we know it.
It's obvious why the Trump administration would target Clarence Thomas for their election interference schemes. Emails obtained by the January 6th committee showed that Trump's legal team considered Thomas to be vital to their efforts to overturn Georgia's election results back in 2020. Then Trump attorney Kenneth Chesebro wrote in an email sent on December 31st, 2020, quote, "We want to frame things so that Thomas could be the one to issue some sort of stay or other circuit justice opinion saying Georgia is in legitimate doubt."
I'd also like to thank Justice Clarence Thomas and his incredible wife, who's here someplace. There she is. Incredible, highly respected wife, too, I will say. I remember a couple of years ago, a little bit more than that, toward the end of my first term, I was introducing a lot of people at a big event, about 5,000 people, in your biggest ballroom. You know what that is? And they were getting a nice smattering of applause. They were very important people. And then I introduced Justice Clarence Thomas. The place went crazy. And it was then that I realized that you are a very popular guy and respected guy. So thank you for being here.
Now, with the November midterms looming and Donald Trump's approval ratings in the toilet, it seems the Republicans are relying on Thomas's lack of morality and impartiality yet again. In a recent hearing about whether the U.S. Postal Service can intentionally withhold mail, Clarence Thomas wrote for a 5-4 majority that a law protecting the U.S. Postal Service from lawsuits over lost or miscarried mail bars lawsuits over mail that was intentionally misdelivered. Boy, I wonder why they might want to lock that down before the midterms.
You pushed out on social media about doing away with mail-in ballots and potentially electronic voting machines. Can you expand on that and how important
Well, that's a very off-topic, just really quickly. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place. The other thing we want changed are the machines. For all of the money they spend, it's approximately 10 times more expensive than paper ballots. And paper ballots are very sophisticated with the watermark paper and everything else. We would get secure elections. We'd get much faster results. The machines, I mean, they say we're going to have the results in 2 weeks. With paper ballots, you have the results that night. Most people, but most people, many countries use paper ballots. It's the most secure form. So between paper ballots, very, very important, paper ballots, and I think maybe even more important, the mail-in voting. We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, you will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected. Because with men and women's sports and with transgender for everybody and open borders and all of the horrible things, and now the new thing is they love crime.
This ruling has obvious and terrifying implications, meaning effectively that the U.S. Postal Service is beyond reproach, regardless of how important and valuable the undelivered mail may be, including, perhaps, to the fate of our republic. Now, Clarence Thomas effectively gave the green light to Trump's post office to intentionally lose mail-in ballots 6 months before the midterm elections. In Trump's recent State of the Union address, his call for an end to mail-in ballots included a direct address to Chief Justice John Roberts, and it is terrifying to see just how quickly and how diligently the Supreme Court has fallen in line.